Welcome to Career Darshak program of Dream Path Foundation. Career Darshak introduces you to actual professionals from many different careers. You will get to know directly from practitioners many things about their professions. Our professionals will tell you about a typical day in their working life, what skills, abilities, aptitude you need to make a career in that profession, the opportunities and rewards, typical challenges one could face, and the growth paths. Our professionals will share first-hand experiences and suggestions with youngsters like you who want to pursue a particular profession. You will also hear about future trends, prospects, and tips to jumpstart a bright and long-term career in your chosen profession. In this episode of Career Darshak, you will be getting to know more about career in journalism and mass media. Let us understand who is a journalist. A journalist is someone who plays an important role in bringing to you news about what is happening in the world around you. A journalist may be working for a newspaper, magazine, or a news channel on television or radio or the internet. A journalist observes events, conducts interviews, gets news feeds, and reads about happening around the world. A journalist is also a writer because he or she writes what you finally end up reading. A journalist is an impartial, unbiased reporter of events and is expected to report with integrity. Let us meet a business journalist who has worked in journalism for many years with highly renowned media houses. Let us explore answers to some important and interesting questions about making a career in media and journalism. Now, don't you want to know what does it take to be a journalist?
Hi, I'm Archana. I'm a business journalist. And I'm here to share with you my thoughts on what it takes for you to be one yourself, perhaps, in the fullness of time when you look to build a career. So journalism is an exciting profession, and that much I'm sure is apparent to everybody who watches television or news and believes that that's what journalism is about. But I think it's good to know also that this is a profession that, while no doubt is exciting, is one that expects that people also prepare very well for the excitement. That really means that you must do your homework. It's a profession that expects tenacity, it expects diligence, and certainly a lot of work before you write a story, tell a story on television, or release it online, where much of journalism is now progressing. So what does it take to be a journalist? Curiosity, I think, is the biggest trait that you must have. You must want to know why something is the way it is. Is there a different way of doing something? Why do people do what they do? Can they do it differently? And is this the right way to do something? I think that really is the basis of what journalism is all about. It's not for nothing that it is referred to as the fourth estate. It's the one profession that allows a person to ask questions of anybody, howsoever high and mighty they might be. It's the one profession that is expected to be the conscience keeper for everybody else, and to be able to present to the larger public the reality of what issues, events, and developments are all about. In the midst of the excitement, I think that's the one thing that you must remember, that there is responsibility involved to the community, to society, and to your country, perhaps, when you choose to be a journalist, it's about being the final, you are the final call of justice for many people who can't really find access to it. As a journalist, you are the one who's able to tell the truth and to tell it honestly, concisely, and in a way that can provoke action to set right something that is wrong. To my mind, that really is the larger purpose of journalism. And while that might sound very forbidding, it isn't really. It's about doing something that you do and doing it very well. It's good for you to remember that the excitement is what you see at the end of this journey. But what you should begin with, really, is to want to tell the truth.
Who can be a journalist? What are the key character strengths and skills required to be a journalist? And what are the opportunities, challenges, and rewards of being a journalist?
So you might want to know who can then be a journalist. Like I said earlier, you must be curious, of course you must be. But I think you should also be somebody who is a fan of the truth, howsoever unpalatable, bitter or difficult it is. Really, your responsibility as a journalist is to guard the truth. It's very simple. Everything else follows that. So what else would you need to do to be a journalist? You have to be well-read. And when I say well-read, I don't necessarily mean that you have to read all the classics available, which of course if you're interested you must. They're wonderful. But it's about being informed about everything that is happening around you. Because what happens in journalism is that you get an opportunity to view an event or a development and to interpret that for your reader, for your viewer. So to do that, you must know what goes behind it, is it not? You can't really go out and expect to give perspective about anything at all if you don't know what goes on behind. Because the one truth that a journalist realizes very quickly is that things are never what they seem to be. Being able to understand that and to interpret that is what, as a journalist, we are expected to do day in and day out. Do we do it all the time? Well, that's for you to judge, because I'm sure you read the papers, you watch the news, and you read news online. So I'm sure you have your view on how it's done. But nevertheless, that is what you should aspire to do. And there are many places that you can go to learn these traits, perhaps, or be trained to do this. But to my mind, it is a calling. It's said because I think once you choose to be a journalist, what you're choosing is to step back from being a doer to being an observer. It's a big shift that you make in life, and one that you must be very comfortable in doing. You must understand that you will always be the observer, or if to put it in a different way, you will always be the third umpire. You will never be the Virat Kohli out there playing the game. So you must ask yourself, are you okay with being the third umpire? Because that is who a journalist is. You will always be on the sidelines. Sure, you'll get a very great seat, you'll get a vantage view, you get a ringside view, but you must remember you will never be the player. You will always be the observer. And that is a responsibility, because when you watch something that's happening and you go out and relate it to others, you must say it the way it happened, not the way that you believed it happened or the way you wished that it happened. Those are not okay. That's the crux of being a journalist. And once you realize that that is your responsibility and it is what you want to do, only then must you choose this as a profession. It's important, therefore, I think you would have realized from what I've told you, to be a really very good journalist, you must have a calm mind, because a journalist is always in the midst of frenetic activity. You have to meet deadlines, you have to definitely understand events and issues very quickly, because you have to go out there and write about it for others to read. You have to write about it quickly, and also you must write it well. Although there are others who will improve what you've written, you must be able to help them with it, right? You must write something that others can understand to improve. To do all of this, you need a calm mind. So just to recap again as to what qualities are required: curiosity, honesty, calmness, and a lot of stamina. This is not a profession for the faint-hearted. You will always find yourself working very long hours. You will find yourself very tired, very dispirited, and often you will ask yourself, is this worth it? But that answer is something that only each one of you who's chosen to be a journalist will be able to answer. For many, it's the high of seeing your name in the paper the next day. It's the high of being able to speak to anybody, like I said, howsoever mighty they might be, on equal terms. Because as a journalist, you can ask a question of anybody and the person has to answer. That is a huge high for many people. Along with that comes a responsibility, because whatever that person tells you or answers to a question that you ask, you have to be honest in relating that and in making sure that you ask the questions that matter and not things that are irrelevant. So in all, it's a profession definitely for people who want to do good, who want to do it well, and who are not afraid of change. Because that is the one thing as a journalist that you need to be very aware of. Nothing remains the same. You are dealing with news, so it's the nature of your work. You're also dealing with an industry that's probably changing every day. In far more than any other profession, you have to be somebody who's not rooted to your chair or is a creature of habit. You will never make it as a journalist if you are. You've got to be able to embrace change, understand what it means, and be comfortable in working in an environment like that every day. If you have all of these qualities, I would say journalism is for you.
How does one train to be a journalist? What are the courses one can pursue to become a journalist? And what kind of groundwork can one do to prepare a career in journalism?
So how do you train to be a journalist? Well, as in every other profession, there is a formal training process involved even in being a journalist. There are courses that you can join that will offer you a degree in journalism soon after you finish class 12, undergraduate courses that offer a variety of journalistic training, which includes, I think, communicative language skills, it includes editing, it includes writing itself, really the nuts and bolts of the profession. That is one way of doing this, of course. The other would be to take an undergraduate course that helps you specialize in an area of expertise that you might have, anything that you are particularly good at. So what do you like? Do you like economics? Do you like sociology? Or perhaps you like statistics? It's not an issue. Any one of these which you learn well and are able to translate later to help readers, viewers interpret the world is always an advantage. There are courses once you finish your undergraduate course that could still help you train in what I referred to earlier as the nuts and bolts of the profession. There are many diplomas available right now in India itself, which run very good programs that help you prepare for what eventually a newsroom might look like to you when you enter a profession. My own view of this, after a career of over 20 years in journalism, is that you must specialize in your area of preference. For instance, you might be an engineer who later loves to write and probably wants to tell stories to people. In fact, that's what it is. I think I missed telling you this. In journalism, we always talk about it, that finally, what is it that we're doing? We're telling stories. So we're not telling fictional stories, we're telling factual stories. That is the difference. Finally, at the end of the day, what a journalist does is tell a story, a factual story with right information and the right attribution to a reader or a viewer. To be able to tell these stories very well, you must know what you're talking about, is it not? In my newsroom where I now work, I have a variety of people who work with me. There are people who have degrees in sociology, there are people who have degrees in engineering, computer science, some of them in economics. It's a wide variety of people. All of them are skilled in an area that they have been trained in and perhaps which they do enjoy and are passionate. But above all, they are passionate about journalism. So most of them have gone on and have gotten special skills or training in journalism itself, having first received an undergraduate degree in a specialist discipline. That, to my mind, is always a better way of doing it. Incidentally, it's what I did too. I have an undergraduate degree in economic psychology and English literature, which I acquired many years ago, as you can imagine. And I went on then to do a diploma in journalism. That helped because while I had studied what I enjoyed studying, I also needed to know what a newsroom would look like. So going out and doing a year's diploma course in what in my time was referred to as mass communication was a good process, because I met a lot of journalists who came out and taught those courses. So I understood what it would be and what it would look like when I finally did enter a newsroom. Having said this, I must share an anecdote. So when I did my course in journalism, we were taught reporting, we were taught writing, and we were taught to specialize in different areas within journalism. For instance, there were courses in political reporting, there were courses on business reporting, there were courses on sports writing, there were perhaps courses on feature writing. My memory now fails me, but I think these were the many choices that were available to us. We had to take courses in all of these. It was when I was doing those courses that I realized that my interest lay very firmly in the area of business journalism. These were the days when large mills in India were being closed down, and land that was taken up by these mills were being redeveloped. And it was a huge urban issue in those days. There were stories of people, there were human interest stories, there were business stories, and an understanding of how economic cycles impact the lives of people. I was fascinated, and I realized that these are the stories that I want to tell as I went on to become a journalist. So what helped really was that I knew before I entered a newsroom what sort of journalist I wanted to be. To that extent, I think it's very good to have a professional grounding before you actually seek a job, because I was in no doubt when I entered a newsroom what sort of a newsroom I wanted to be in. I did not want to be a political journalist. I did not want to be a journalist who just wrote soft features. I was someone who wanted to understand economic cycles and the impact that it would have on people. So in turn, I chose to apply to media houses that would offer me such opportunities, and it helped me focus a career and begin early on in a focused manner. That, I think, is perhaps a good way to do it. It's not the only way, remember. There is never only one way to do something. What I'm sharing is just my experience of it and what I feel in 2 decades hence, what has worked for me. So to sort of summarize again, to be a journalist, you can, of course, do an undergraduate course in journalism. You can then enter a newsroom and choose the area that you might want to specialize in. Or else you can get an undergraduate course in an area of your expertise, go on and get a diploma, maybe a professional diploma in journalism that helps you orient yourself to a newsroom environment, and seek a job in a publication or a media house that fits in with your focus. These are different ways of doing it. It really is up to an individual to choose what works best for each person.
Aren't you curious about what exactly happens inside a media house? Who are the people involved in bringing you the news, and what do they do all day? Let's get the inside story from someone who has spent many years in newsrooms. Let's get answers to these questions. What does the newsroom of a media house look like? Who are the various professionals involved in media work? What is a typical day of a journalist like? What are the special qualities one needs to possess to sustain the stress and demands of a journalist's job?
Having said that, once you enter a newsroom, what does it look like? I have been a print journalist for over 2 decades, as I said, so what I can speak about is a print newsroom. So you will meet reporters, you will meet editors, and you will also meet the team that produces the paper. So largely in a newsroom, we are divided into what we call the reporting teams and the editing teams. So the Reporting teams are as you can imagine, the most aspired for jobs, because this is where everyone thinks the excitement is. So you begin as a reporter. You will probably be attached to a team of others who work along with you. You will report to an editor who assigns tasks to you and looks at your story when it comes in at the end of the day. So a normal day for a reporter, to begin, would possibly start with, normally what you must remember with a reporter's life is, life does not begin in the morning. It actually gets set the previous evening, because you have to have an idea of what it is that you're going to do the next day before you go to sleep the previous night, or else you're never going to be able to do it. That's very honest advice, because unless you know who you're going to meet, what event you're going to cover, and perhaps what development you're going to track the previous night, how can you expect to just wake up in the morning, find out, discover something, go do it, come back and write a story? No, that won't happen. So life is pretty much 24/7 once you reach a newsroom. That doesn't mean you don't get to sleep, but you just need to be very smart about when you sleep and what you do. So you come in to work, you go out perhaps, and if you are an editor perhaps, you would have to attend a news meeting, whereas if you're a reporter, you go out the first half of the day, go out and get your story, and you're back in office, say perhaps by about 3, after which you sit and write a story, and you get about an hour at best, an hour and a half, okay, 2 hours, but your story has to be ready at the end of 2 hours for certain, after which it is edited by the editor to a reporter is assigned to. Stories, once they're cleared by an editor, are then released to what we in the trade refer to as the desk. The desk is the production end of the newsroom. On the desk too, there is a certain amount of editing that happens, which again in journalistic terms is referred to as subbing. So the people who do this are referred to as sub-editors. What they're really doing is, because the story has been cleared by an editor, it would probably be, final checks for grammar, to see the word length of the story that's been released, and finally to have a page design and a layout into which your story would fit in. The sub-editor also gives the headlines for the story. So these people, the ones who man the desk, as we refer to it, have a little bit of a different work cycle than a reporter. These people tend to come into work by about 3:30 or 4, and their task then is to check what we refer to as the news list. That is a list of all the stories that will appear for the day. They then get down to planning how the page will look. They too will have their editors whom they report to, and each page has a page editor. So these page editors design the layout. In what is also very important is the advertising department of a newspaper. You must remember that a newspaper does not run just by the money that you pay to buy that newspaper. For that matter, do you know how much you pay for your newspaper every day? Well, if you don't, then it is possibly sometimes a rupee, maybe a rupee and a half, maybe 2, at best 3 rupees. Do you think that's what it costs to bring out a newspaper of 24 pages every day? It doesn't, If you were to pay the full price for it, you'd probably be paying 25 rupees every day for your morning newspaper. Sounds enormous, doesn't it? So how does it come to you so cheap? It comes to you so cheap because there are advertisers who place advertisements in your newspaper, who in fact carry the weight of the cost of the product that you have in your hands every morning. So you would now understand the importance of why advertisements may be annoying, but they're very important to the life of a newspaper. So the page layout that I mentioned to you earlier gets drawn up just by about 4:30 or 5 every evening, because that is when the advertising department knows what advertisements are slotted for that day's edition. So they come in with their page plan. Stories are then planned, designed and released in keeping with what we refer to as the advertisement plan. So it's a lot of coordination which you as a journalist will not be involved with, because there is a very clear Chinese wall that separates advertising from editorial in a newsroom. This is going back again, it's a very critical divide, and one that you must understand why it is very important. Because your task, the advertisement may be the reason why your newspaper costs so much less than what it actually requires to be produced. Having said that, they have no influence whatsoever on what is written on the editorial sections. This is a very important point that every journalist, everyone who wants to be a journalist must understand. As a reporter, you don't interact with the advertising department because they really have nothing to do with your work. Your responsibility is to your reader to be able to report what is true, what is correct, and what is factual. That has no relation to what is advertised in the paper by the side of your story, even. That's a very big difference that you must be aware of. So, by 7, the stories are all laid out, and I suppose after that, it is really about double-checking facts. It's about making place for late stories, it's making place for sudden developments, which then is the task of the editors. Reporters tend to finish work by about 7:30 at the most in most newsrooms, unless they work in areas where there is news that develops late in the night. And that's how it works. So it's very frenetic in the newsroom from 7 p.m. onwards. There are editors who are hassled, there are page designers and graphic artists, and there are the production people, everyone running helter-skelter, but there is method to this madness. It's a very finely tuned sort of orchestra in that sense, which finally ends up as a product, say by about midnight, after which it moves on to the printing press, and that's it. And then you get your paper in the morning. So this is a very shortened version of how it looks like in a newsroom, and what the pulls and pressures will be. You will understand from what I've just told you that there is reason why you should plan, and why being prepared for the next day is so important in the life of a journalist. This is all the time that you get to actually work and produce a product at the end of the day in a span of maybe less than 5 to 6 hours. That's all you get. So you need to be quick, you need to be alert, you need to have a lot of stamina, and you need to have a great ability to get other people to speak to you. Because if you are a reporter, the work that you do is largely dependent on having people trust you and speak to you, so that they share information with you that you can then double check and report in a way that it should be done. So that's how a day in the newsroom looks like from a reporter's point of view.
Like all professions, media and journalism has changed in many ways over the last decade and is continuing to change at a rapid pace. Let's get an idea of what does the future of journalism look like, and how can one prepare for future trends.
Having said this, my experience has been in print for a long time now, and I suspect what I have worked, the ways that I have worked, will not remain constant even in the next 2 years. You probably know more about why this will happen than I do, even because it's really about the way people like you read and view news. India is the only country where the print industry is growing, where newspapers are still delivered at home. It doesn't happen in most other countries in the world, and certainly not in large developed countries like the United States, where people read their news online, read it on their mobile phones, and not even read it in the way that a newspaper delivers it. They're mostly reading what they want to read, from maybe Facebook posts, from LinkedIn posts, from news aggregation sites, from a variety of sources where they read what they like to read and mostly disregard what they are not interested in. So what that means is information is becoming very, very specific. People are choosing what they want to give their time to, what they want to read, and how they want to read it, of course. So this will change journalism far more than anything ever has influenced it, perhaps in the last 20 years, where I have been a journalist. So if you're looking at a career in journalism, I think this is one aspect that you must remember. By the time you graduate and you enter a newsroom, it will be for certain a multimedia newsroom. You will not be writing only for print or for television or for an online product. You will probably be doing so for all three. What that means is that the way news is delivered will change. That's all. The basic aspect, the values, the systems that have govern journalism will never change, because there is reason why people read what a media house puts out. There is a reason why people switch on television and watch a media house beaming the news. There is a reason why people go online and look for news from a established media house. What they're looking for, in one word, is credibility. Credibility about whether the information has been double-checked. Is it being delivered in a non-opinionated way when it is information? And when it is opinion, is it well thought out opinion? Has this been attributed correctly? Are the people involved in the event or the news development, have they been given a chance to say what they want to say? Now these are the things that you want to see, right? This is what you want to know when you read a piece of news or listen to something on television or radio or online. This is something that a professional organization can deliver, which is why journalism will continue, it will thrive, and it will be a profession, that an aspirational profession, most certainly in the years to come. The only thing that will change is the way that this information is delivered to people. That is the change that you must prepare for and you must think about. But while you're doing that, I think what you must remember most of all is that the values of journalism remain constant. It's about curiosity, it's about honesty, it's about being factual and quick. Thank you.
Thank you.